All right. Welcome to Repc class. The last video was a abysmal attempt at teaching the Repc. It had good content in there, but it had a lot of interruptions where we just needed to get through the material. There were some really good questions, so I'm going to actually leave both videos up so that there are multiple ways you can learn this. But first things first, the Repc is our bread and butter. It is the contract that we are going to use the most. It is our lifeblood, right? Following the Repc and learning how to use it and learning how to protect our clients is how to stand out from everybody else. When you can competently use the Repc and protect your clients, that's going to make you more valuable than the realtor next door, or when you go up against homie and things like that. All right, enough about that. I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew everybody knows the Repc is super important. This is going to be a fun video though, so I'm excited to get the material out to you in a very systematic form and make sure that there aren't any interruptions so that the video is not crazy long. Okay, so we use the Repc off of .loop, but like I said, I'm trying to just not show my clients information all the time on these videos, so now I'm going to just go to the Repc from the MLS, but it's virtually the same on .loop, but more interactive on .loop so that you can fill out all the boxes. But we're just going to use it through here. So to find it on the MLS, log into the MLS, go to Forms, go to Forms Library, type Repc or whatever you want to do to find it. Scroll down, find Real Estate Purchase Contract Repc. Click on that. All right. So we're going to get right into it. Real estate purchase contract. Like I said, if you don't learn anything else out of here other than this thing is really important, that's the thing to learn. But I hope you learned some more about how to use the Repc more than what you just learned in Stringham. And hopefully you can learn from some of my stories that I'll hopefully have and share with some of the sections. So, okay. Of course, when we're offering, this offer date is the date that we're offering to the sellers. You can have sellers represent or write this real estate purchase contract first and give it to buyers. Right now, that's just not the market we're in. There's 10 or 15 buyers for every home, so it's just buyers are writing these things on like every piece of property that we could get their hands on. So let's say today we're writing it today. I'd put the offer date as the 16th of January. The buyer's name, I would put your buyer's legal name that they want to have on title. You could also put husband and wife names together, or people that are purchasing a property together. An LLC, whatever the legal entity is that's going to be purchasing, that's who you put for buyer. When you get to the seller side, instead of going and hunting down who the seller is, which sometimes it's wrong on title and it just hasn't updated in the county records, I like to put owner on record, and let's see if it'll just let me type that in. The reason why I like to do owner on record is it's a catch-all for whoever owns this piece of property. If they just put it into a trust, if they just got a divorce, if they are taking title in a different way, owner on record saves you the hassle of figuring out who it is first. And then later on, your lender may make you put in who it is, or when the seller receives this and they want to counter back, they'll write in who the seller is, and they've taken care of it. It makes it really easy. All right, let's talk about earnest money here. When you do get a contract, everybody has been using this right now, the no later than 4 calendar days after acceptance to deliver the earnest money. So let's say you guys accepted today. That would be, let's see, that'd be today, tomorrow. Nope, sorry, hold on. So let's say after acceptance. So they accepted today, that'd give you 17, 18, 19, 20 to put it in the account. Or to deliver it to me to put into the account. Okay? All right, earnest money. Let's say they were going to use 1,000. That's kind of the norm right now, unless you're wanting to make it look a lot better. Then I would say bump it up to 2,000. Or if you want to make it look even better, whatever your clients will put on the line for earnest money, and that's a conversation you have to have with each buyer. I've been seeing a lot more 1% as earnest money. So if you're writing a contract on a 460 grand property, maybe you want $4,600 for the earnest money. That's something that you guys can determine. I usually just write check in as the form, and that way it can cover you for cashier's check, regular check. Sometimes we wire still, even if we write check. So it just depends, right? Make sure you know how your clients are going to make the earnest money deposit, but most of the time it's a check. Little plug here, always take a picture of the check they give you before you put it into the account. I apologize, I got something in the back of my throat, I guess. That sounds funny. All right, property, write the property address right here. City, write the city that you're going to put in there. County, self-explanatory. Zip code, self-explanatory. This box here is the tax ID number, right? So it says it right here. Tax ID number, put it there. That's like simple clerical stuff, but people mess it up all the time. And sometimes you mess it up and you haven't done it on purpose, but sometimes the lender or title says, hey, you've got this typo in there. It might be like a unit number incorrect or the commas are incorrect. There's a lot of stuff there. Just pay attention to what your lender wants and the underwriters want. Then you can fix your addendums and fix the typos you have. All right, other included items. This is stuff that you're going to include with the contract. Maybe a washer and a dryer. Maybe a microwave, right? Maybe it's blinds. Whoops, blinds. That was a bad typo. Okay, and then maybe you do have some other property that's going to be conveyed by a separate bill of sale. Typically, that's not the case. So we usually have the box or the circle marked "are not," just for personal property. Lenders like to see if there's personal property being bought through this. They'll want to see the bill of sale and dollar amount and stuff like that. We typically don't run into that very often because people take most of their personal belongings with them. If they are leaving some, let's say hot tub in general, I've seen this happen many times. People are going to leave the hot tub. They include it into the sale and they write it in right here, right? Hot tub. And doing so, the lender's like, hey, we don't want that in the contract. Can you remove it from the contract? So sometimes we remove it out of the contract, or we just have an addendum that says, buyer and seller agree hot tub is of zero value. And that pushes it off of the lender's table and the underwriter's table. So lots of silly stuff happens right there. If you have questions, just give me a call all the time. I'll answer those for you. Excluded items, you could exclude whatever you want in here. A lot of excluded items might be a chandelier that is the owner's grandma's or something. Hot tub is a big one here. Flashy window coverings, like if they have $600 drapes or something that they made themselves or whatever, they might write the exclusion here. Just be aware, if your clients really want whatever item that is, just write it into the inclusions. Make sure that everybody knows about it. The more forthcoming you can be with the information here, the easier this process is. All right, water service. Typically, there aren't a lot of people that will have to deal with water service because it's usually public. If you're just doing a single family residence or a condo or something. So typically, you don't really need to worry about this. If you have land and there are water shares, make sure you do something about this section. But make sure that you understand that if you write something in this box, those are excluded. So don't write anything in this box if you want it to be included. I would include it up here. 8 water shares. Or whatever, right? Just put it in there. 8 water shares of strawberry water, or however the shares are determined. This section does cover water shares that will be conveyed, but sometimes the water shares aren't a piece of the property, right? They're held in a personal account. So you have to make sure that you know your clients are going to get those water shares. That's why I like to write them in up here, because sometimes they're personal property and not attached to the property itself. Just write in your inclusions. All right, payment of purchase price. Let's say this thing's a cool $500,000. You can write it like this. You can write it like this. You can write it like this. Whatever you like, and however you like to make your contracts look, that's up to you. Nobody's going to say, oh, this was a typo because you didn't put a period here. That would have made this a $5,000 property. Nope. Nobody's going to question you on that. Just put 500 grand or however you're going to write it. It's fine. Earnest money. I can't remember what we left up there, but let's just call it 5,000. Whoops. So we can have easy math. I'll try not to do math on the fly because I usually screw that up. All right. Additional earnest money. I have almost never used additional earnest money except for once or twice. This was where my client said, hey, we have $1,000 now, but we want to make it $2,000, so we'll do another $1,000 after we get paid. So then I made the additional earnest money deposit in here as $1,000. Let's just say we don't have that, so we're going to do 0. New loan. Right now, I love to use TBD or to be determined. Just because the loan specifics are so difficult to figure out on the fly and to make sure that they're accurate. And we are able to change those anytime. 2.1c and 2.1e may be adjusted as deemed necessary by the buyer and or the lender at any time. So even if you wrote something in here anyways, let's say new loan was going to be $400,000. Even if we write that, we can do whatever we want. We can bring more, we can bring less. It doesn't matter because we can change that at a whim. Seller financing. If you're going to go down the road of seller financing, let's have a discussion together. That's a whole nother ballpark. So right now, just put 0. Most of the time, you're not going to be dabbling into seller financing unless you're really starting to do some outside of the box thinking for purchasing property. If you go down that road, like I said, let's have a conversation. Okay, balance of purchase price in cash at settlement, $95,000. Now you can just see if we added up 5,000, 400 grand, and 95,000, we get a grand total again of 500,000. Very, very easy process. These numbers should add up to this number. If they don't, you did something wrong. Sometimes your contracts will look like this. Just saying that you don't know how much cash your clients are going to bring. A way to make your clients stand out from the rest would be to say, hey, we have a down payment. Maybe it's $145,000. So let's make that change. New loan's going to be $350,000. You guys can do the math and see if I'm okay there. So sometimes we want to make our contract look good, and the way to do that is to, 1, have strong earnest money, number 2, have a strong down payment, right? They don't necessarily have to use all 145 to come down. and make that down payment. But this looks stronger than somebody who's FHA with no money, because a seller knows that your clients have room to pay out of pocket if needed. And in today's market, you guys know, it's multiple offers just about every single time and over appraisal almost every single time. So if you're an FHA buyer, you're going to be put out or pushed out by conventional, of course, and cash like pushes everybody out. Okay, sale of buyer's property. If you do have a buyer that needs to sell a piece of property, just put is conditioned upon the sale of that property. If your clients can't qualify for 2 loans at the same time, it's conditioned upon the sale of the property. So just make sure you mark that. Okay, settlement and closing. Settlement, of course, you guys know that's just going to the table, signing the documents. I would read this line by line, but this video would take another hour, so let's not do that. Closing, for all intents and purposes, is the settlement's done. Everybody's signed docs. Proceeds of new loan have been delivered to by the lender to the seller or the escrow closing office, and then everything has been recorded, right? We all understand that the property is not actually transferred until after recording. That's when possession can be, and we'll go over possession. You really need to make sure that it's recorded, though, before you do any of the possessionary tactics. Okay, let's talk about possession. So, possession, except as provided in section 6.1a or b, which we'll go over those in a little bit, you can either mark upon closing or upon recording, So that means you guys go sign, it funds, it records. Let's say it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon. You could go get those keys for your clients. Or let's say hours after recording, maybe you want to do a 72 hour, 48 hours is pretty common. I've seen tons of hourly requirements that are all sorts of different. So it matters what the sellers want. I've even had 14 calendar day possessions. When you go outside of 14 days, that might be too long. It just depends, right? It depends on every scenario, but make sure your clients understand possession, because they will be hammering and chomping at the bit to get possession of that home, because they have movers, people ready to help them move, a truck full of their stuff like sitting in the driveway, and you're like, "Ooh, we didn't record." Okay. I want to make sure it's very clear. Possession is a topic that you need to have the conversations with your clients multiple times. Okay, I'm off my soapbox about that now. Woo, let's move on. All right, prorations and special assessments. There could be any type of proration with the property. You could have a special assessment done by the city that's like, hey, we did a new sewer line. Everybody's paying an extra $50, blah, blah, blah. Determine who's paying for those. Make sure that you know exactly who's paying for what. Protect your clients. Get all the information. And then disclose everything, right? Disclose. Tell it to everybody. Fees, costs, payment obligations. You have escrow fees. Who's paying for what? Rental deposits, if it's going to be split. Sometimes, like if you're buying an Airbnb and it has a few more rentals, who gets that income, stuff like that. When you're going down those rabbit holes, it's very specific to what those types of businesses are doing. So just be aware, gain all the knowledge and information, pass that along to your clients. Let them choose. All right, HOA requirements. I usually make sellers pay for those. Typically, I mark seller and everything in here. Especially if I'm representing buyers, I'll typically mark seller just so that everybody understands that the seller, I want them to pay. But sometimes the seller will respond, hey, we want to split them equally. So I usually start one way, and if we get pushed to the side, we'll go down that road, or maybe we'll split cost. All right, confirmation of agency disclosure. This section is new as of about, I don't know, maybe a year or 2 years ago now. The section itself was in there, but they added real estate license numbers to each person that's involved with the transaction. The numbers weren't in there as of about 2 years ago. So now you need to look up who the seller's agent is. It's very simple on the MLS. Just look up their name. Their number will be there. Put their name, number, and who they're representing. And make sure you mark all the appropriate bubbles. All right, you can see this already filled it out for a buyer's agent. I just work with a lot of buyers, so I don't know. Maybe it's giving me a premonition. Just kidding. All right, title insurance. Not a lot of people understand what title insurance actually is, or what it does, or how it protects. Get Brandy Sajek or Bo Pilley at Oasis to give you a synopsis of what title insurance is. You can really read this through and learn about it, but they can give you the nuts and bolts and kind of in like layman's terms so that we can understand it. Seller's disclosure. There's tons of stuff the sellers are supposed to give you during the transaction to disclose information about the property. Typically, we only get this one, seller's property condition disclosure for the property. If you've seen any posts that I've made about that form, I feel like that form is very inadequate currently, and not a lot of people actually fill it out. So I feel like we get more information by doing the home inspection, talking to the realtor as much as possible, and possibly talking to the neighbors about the piece of property. But the sellers are supposed to try to give you all this information if they have it. You can start trying to request all this information. If they don't have it, you may have to go hunt it down. All right, buyer's due diligence, or buyer's conditions of purchase. Due diligence, I usually mark is. I want to protect my clients and give them that free look period where they can just, for any reason or no reason at all, break the contract if they feel like it's not the property for them. Let's say I give them a 10-day due diligence. That just gives them 10 days to really do all these things in here if they want to. One of the ones that me and one of the team members were talking about was convicted sex offenders. I guess they wrote a contract on a piece of property and either got it locked up or almost locked up. They pulled the sex offender registry and it was just like a block of sex offenders everywhere. And so his clients canceled the contract. But that is part of what due diligence is. Due diligence is for you to make all those assessments with your client, or have your client make all those assessments to make sure that property is for them. Okay, buyer has rights to cancel if you do have this marked is. If you mark is not, you're waiving all your rights to that. There are a lot of instances where you can and might have to do that. I'm not going to talk about each and every specific instance because it would just make this video really long. If you have specific questions, make sure you just ask me, text me, call me, whatever. All right, this talks about if you fail to cancel or resolve those objections. All right, this might be your appraisal condition. Maybe you are getting a loan. If you are getting a loan, it doesn't mean you have to mark appraisal condition. This just protects you when you get the appraisal. If it comes back low, you could break the contract if the appraised value is not what's on the contract. Lots of scenarios with that. What I'm saying here is you don't have to have the appraisal condition even if you're going to get a loan. It's just smart to do so. All right, financing condition. If your clients need financing, then make sure you mark financing is required. And make sure that you understand that when you have financing required, you can protect your clients here if they don't get the interest rate they want, if they can't get the loan they want, if the process isn't what they want, they can breach the contract for financing. All right, this box here is a new box as of about a year ago where you can determine, hey, we're outside of due diligence, but we are within the financing and appraisal deadline. So if we don't get our financing, maybe we'll give you $500. Or in this case, I think we were doing 5,000, so maybe we would do a split, and we give you half of the earnest money and say, sorry, we wasted your time. We're moving on because we couldn't get financed. Or what I like to do, I start at 0 and see if anybody notices it or they negotiate on it. Right? Because if it's 0 and you breach after the due diligence, then you still get to keep your money for your clients. So then it's a win. All right, buyer's right to cancel after financing and appraisal deadline. That would be a breach of contract, and then the earnest money would be going to the sellers, unless you have something weird written into the contract, but it would be handed over. Okay, earnest money deposits released to the seller. This talks about how that's done. Typically, if you are working with a broker like me, we put it in a trust account because I like to have the control. There are many brokerage firms that will require you to deliver the earnest money to a title company. That releases the control from the broker or the brokerage company, and puts the control into the title company. Except for title companies are super slow, so it may take a long time to get your client's money. I just prefer to have us in control of that earnest money. All right, additional earnest money. Like I said, I've almost never used this. So normally I mark will not and 0. But if your clients needed an extra week to pay a little bit more earnest money, maybe you would do will and how much it is. But make sure that you have marked it adequately in the boxes on the first page that say how much you're going to bring. All right, most likely you're going to have some type of addendums or addenda. There is just a lot of contracts or it's very few contracts that are just the 6-page Repc. It's pretty rare to have it that way, but it does happen. But typically you do have some addenda to attach. So just mark which addenda you're using, type it in, make sure it's all accurate. I will have a video all about addenda. We have one currently, but I'm going to make a new one that actually goes over every single addenda that we have access to. And hopefully that one will explain every piece of the addenda that needs to be attached. All right, home warranty plan. Lately, we haven't loved home warranty companies, but if you still prefer to get your buyers a home warranty, you can. I would just mark will. Make sure it's ordered by the buyer, by a company selected by the buyer, maybe not to exceed $500, and then paid for by the seller. Some sellers won't want to buy a home warranty because they're like, I'm already shelling out money. I'm not going to spend another $500. So this is a negotiation piece. So if you have a buyer that wants to look good on the contract, you can put will not, and this just makes it a 0 on this line and less things to negotiate about. All right, condition of property buyer acknowledgments. You're acknowledging to the physical condition of the property. Same thing with a seller, and then obviously everybody's trying to make sure that nobody knocks down a wall or adds a garage or anything crazy. The thing that's in the seller side is broom clean condition and free of debris and personal belongings. That's open for interpretation, right? Broom clean to you might be way different than the next guy or next gal. So on your final walkthrough, if you don't love it, let them know. Or if you close and there's like a garage full of garbage, communicate with everybody and come up with a solution. It's much easier to communicate rather than just go and breathe fire on them, because you attack them, they're going to be defensive and then try to attack you, so it's just a lose-lose. Final pre-settlement walkthrough. There's a whole video about this section. We'll skip over that. Changes during transaction. if there are changes, make sure everybody's aware of those and that they're in writing. You don't want any hidden assessments or unknowns, right? Like they light a fire in the basement and it burns down halfway, but nobody tells anybody. That would be an alteration to the property. Okay, authority of the signers. You need to make sure that your people signing this contract are of authority. Sometimes you'll run into this if it's an LLC. You need to make sure that the person signing is actually one of the authorized signers with the LLC. So if you don't know how to do that, or you don't feel comfortable and you think somebody's yanking your chain on it, get with me. We'll ask them. We'll get their documents that actually support them being the authorized signer. Complete contract. Everybody understands that the complete contract is the entire contract between the parties and supersedes and replaces any and all prior negotiations, right? Like every handshake thing you did right up until this contract, all the handshake stuff's gone. It needs to be in writing. And then, let's see, you can still have verbal stuff, but I would just write it down. Just write it down in the contract. The Repc cannot be changed except for in writing, of course. And one quick note, the complete contract is when it's signed by both parties and relayed to each party, and I'll talk about that. There's another section about that as well. Mediation, any dispute related to the Repc, I usually mark shall here to let people know that we're going to go to mediation first to try to save everybody money before going to court. But there are a lot of agents that love to withhold or maintain that control. If they want to go to court, then they want to skip mediation. But I like to work with people, right? So shall is the one that I normally use. But reserve that right for your client. If they just think that, hey, if this goes to the, like it hits the fan. I'm trying to find the words without cussing a lot. If it hits the fan and they want to go to court, then you'll mark may for them. But typically people love to, or not love to, but they will want to work together at the cheapest rate possible. All right, we got to wrap up in 10 minutes. I got a hiring event, or not an event, but a hiring appointment. So let's get through it. Default, this talks about when a buyer defaults or a seller defaults. Attorney's fees and costs governing law. In the event of litigation or binding arbitration, right? This talks about what happens when the legal courts are notified or attorney's fees come in. Read through that very carefully with your clients so that they understand. To this day, knock on wood, I've never needed any of these. We have had an ethics complaint once, and that felt like a legal court battle. But to this day, we just haven't needed to go down this road because we try to communicate and disclose as much as possible. All right. All notices are going to be in writing, signed by the buyer or seller giving the notice, and received by the buyer or seller or their respective agent or the brokerage firm representing the buyer or seller. Make sure everything's in writing. No assignment. This assignment clause came around because people were writing contracts all the time in their name and then flipping it to somebody else, which is called wholesaling or paper flipping. If you still want to be a paper flipper or a wholesaler, you actually have to strike this clause out or make sure everybody understands you're going to use an assignee. So, but this protects you from signing it to somebody and then them just selling the contract to somebody else. Insurance and risk of loss. This talks about who's going to maintain insurance and what happens if something crazy were to happen. Vandalism, flood, earthquake, act of God. You can read through that. Time is of the essence. Regarding to the dates set forth, this is the big one right in here. References a date shall absolutely be required by 5 p.m. Mountain Time on the stated date, or otherwise written in the contract, right? I'll show you one position where if you write in a different time, then it's different. But on calendar dates, as of seller's disclosure, due diligence, whatever date you put in here, 5 p.m. is the standard deadline. You really need to make sure you understand that, because some clients will feel like, well, we were still in that date for the deadline for due diligence, can we cancel now? And you're like, it's 5:05. Like, no. If we want to cancel, we're going to breach the contract. I usually try to have the conversation earlier that day with my clients and say, hey, due diligence is running out today at 5. Do you guys still want to move forward with this home? All right, electronic transmission and counterparts. This just means everybody's using .loop or DocuSign now. We understand that electronic signatures are good. When you get to title, that's where everybody wet signs or does an electronic transmission that's verified by their picture ID, which is happening more and more. Got to thank COVID for pushing that technology a little bit further. All right, acceptance. This is the piece that I was talking about earlier. Acceptance occurs only when all of the following have occurred. Seller or buyer has signed the offer or counteroffer where noted to indicate acceptance. Okay, number 1, they have to sign that it is accepted. Seller or buyer or their agent has communicated to the other party or to the other party's agent that the offer or counteroffer has been signed as required. So, you send over this Repc, they accept. Their agent tells you they've accepted. Immediately tell your clients that they have accepted so that they know. Because the second that you know that information, by this definition of acceptance, the contract is in place. So you really want to make sure that your clients know that. It's like from you or the horse's mouth is the same, right? The agent told you you're under contract, just let your clients know. I mean, you're not going to hold that information from them anyway. You want them to be excited. Okay, there's a guy at Realty Path. He teaches their courses. I believe his name's Mike, but he talks about an acceptance time that cost him like $5,000 one time. Anyway, it's a really funny story. Not funny. It's a really unique story. It's fun to listen to. Just be cautious. All right, seller's disclosure. This is what I like to do. Let's say today's the 16th. I like to have seller's disclosure about 1 week. I like to have due diligence 2 weeks from either the offer date or the acceptance date. Financing and appraisal, I like to have about 3 weeks. So let's just say that's the 6th. And then settlement deadline, I like to have it right around the 28th day or on a Wednesday. So like the 28th day or 4 weeks from when we're offering this, or hopefully when we get something accepted, would be the 13th. Nobody's signing anything and closing on Saturday. So either bump it forward to the 10th or bump it later to the 17th. This will be pretty tight. Right now, contracts can be closed earlier than a month. Sometimes it's a little later. But a month will give you pretty much a lot of time to figure out where you're at, get all the ducks in a row, line up your contract closing times, and push forward. So remember, 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, or some type of variable with that. That just is a general guideline, so it's easy to remember. So this would be 7 days, 14 days, 21 days, 28 days. Side note, the reason why I like Wednesdays is because it gives you a lot of room for hiccups. If you're going to close on a Friday and it doesn't fund and it doesn't record on Friday, and you don't get those keys for your clients on Friday, and they have a moving truck ready and waiting and filled for Saturday morning at 6, or friends that are coming, and you don't record and they don't have possession, they're going to be pissed. Like, royally pissed. So I like Wednesday because if you have a Wednesday and you were like, hey, we're going to fund and record Wednesday, most likely, but hey, if we record on Thursday, that may be the case. That gives you room for hiccups in there. On a Friday, it just doesn't give you that option, because if you don't fund and record, you might have to wait until Monday. Well, what if Monday is Columbus Day or something and they're closed? Well, then it's Tuesday. So then you're like 4 days behind the power curve with your clients, and they're going to be really upset at you. Wednesday is my favorite. There's usually not any national holidays, unless like Christmas fell on it, or fell in the middle of the, I don't know. Sometimes it happens, right? But Wednesdays is a good cautionary tactic for you. Okay. A couple last things. Offer and time of acceptance. This is that part where I was talking about you could put in a different time. Maybe you want 9 p.m. instead of the standard 5 p.m., right? Write in what you want. Let's say we want offer and acceptance by the 18th. This is not a binding time. Putting this time down does not say, make sure you answer to us before this deadline. This is saying, hey, if you don't talk to us before this deadline, this contract just goes void, no worries, and it just ceases to exist. That does not mean that somebody has to let you know anything before this deadline. It's not a response deadline. I've had so many agents that are like, hey, we put a response in there Monday and you never got back to us. And I'm like, well, your offer was crappy and they didn't even want to look at it. So it died because you put in a response deadline. Sorry, or you put in a time of acceptance. We didn't accept. We didn't counter. We didn't even want to touch it. So we just let it die. Just be cautious about that. There's a lot of agents that think I had a response time in there. It doesn't mean you have to respond. You don't have to do any of that. All right, and then the very end, acceptance, counteroffer, rejection. If you're going to counter, make sure every line that says counter is countered in the correct way. Also, likewise, if you're going to accept, make sure every acceptance line is signed the same way as well. Okay, woo! All right, we made it through training with the Repc. I hope this has been informative. This is half of the length of the old Repc video. I am so excited about that for you guys. As always, if you have questions or comments for me, just let me know. I'm always here, and I will always take your questions, and we can work through things to make sure that you know exactly what you're doing. So, another video, Repc, woo, done, and we'll see you later.